In a dramatic turn of events, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper was seen furiously clashing with Labour leader Keir Starmer. Cooper, known for her fiery temperament, allegedly lashed out in a heated cabinet meeting, slamming the radical changes Rayner has championed under the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. Eyewitnesses claim she was livid over the severe backlash from farmers and landowners, warning that the policy could spark an electoral disaster. However, Starmer, determined to maintain party unity, swiftly shut her down, refusing to let internal disputes further fuel the mounting public outrage. Farmers, already angered by Labour's proposed inheritance tax reforms, are now facing further setbacks as they could be compelled to sell their land for significantly less than its future potential value. Under new provisions in the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, local councils will be given greater authority to acquire farmland through compulsory purchase orders, CPOs, to develop public projects such as schools, hospitals, and housing. However, these expanded powers would allow authorities to buy land at its current market value rather than its estimated worth once developed. According to a report by The Telegraph, this has sparked outrage among agricultural workers and rural communities who feel that Labour is waging an all-out assault on their livelihoods. This development has only added to the frustrations of farmers, many of whom have been actively protesting against Labour's so-called family death tax on inherited agricultural property. The proposed tax, which imposes a 20% levy on estates valued over £1 million, has been described as a direct attack on generational farming, forcing families to sell off land just to meet the tax burden. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner defended the policy, stating that the government aims to launch the biggest building boom in a generation by cutting through bureaucratic hurdles that have long obstructed development projects. However, critics argue that the policy is a thinly veiled land grab that will devastate rural communities and devalue privately owned farmland. She further elaborated that the Planning and Infrastructure Bill would introduce transformative reforms designed to expedite construction efforts, ensuring faster project completions for much-needed housing, transport infrastructure, and energy facilities to help reduce household utility costs. Yet, within Labour's own ranks, dissent is brewing. Reports have surfaced of fiery exchanges between ministers, with Cooper at the centre of internal resistance against Rayner's agenda. At present, land obtained via CPOs is priced according to what is known as hope value, which reflects the anticipated price of the land if planning permission were granted. This pricing approach often leads to disputes, as landowners seek higher compensation, resulting in prolonged negotiations and significant project delays. Reforms implemented earlier this year granted councils the ability to apply for CPOs without incorporating hope values into their calculations. However, the newly proposed changes would remove the requirement for councils to seek government approval before enacting these powers, further accelerating the process. This has led to accusations that Labour is trampling over property rights in pursuit of an aggressive redevelopment agenda. Last week, an intense demonstration erupted as a convoy of massive combine harvesters lined the streets of Whitehall in central London, staging what became known as the Pancake Day Rally. Despite law enforcement banning tractors and other heavy agricultural vehicles from entering the city, farmers found alternative ways to make their voices heard. Chants of "Hands off our land" echoed through the streets, highlighting the growing unrest among those most affected by Labour's policies. This demonstration was part of a wider movement against Labour's inheritance tax changes, which would impose a 20% tax on agricultural estates valued above £1 million. Several high-profile figures, including Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, joined the protest to denounce the proposed tax, describing it as financially ruinous for farming families. Cooper, who has been wary of the political fallout from these decisions, reportedly confronted Starmer behind closed doors, demanding a policy reassessment. As protesters marched down Embankment to the sound of Bob Dylan's "Knocking on Heaven's Door," campaign leaders at the forefront of the demonstration carried a banner with a stark warning: "Is agriculture worth dying for?" The controversy surrounding the inheritance tax has escalated to a disturbing level, with campaigners arguing that the policy could push elderly farmers toward drastic decisions, including suicide, in order to shield their families from financial devastation before the tax takes effect in April 2026. Internal Labour sources claim that Cooper used this very argument during her clash with Starmer, calling for immediate action to quell rural discontent. Labour's Planning and Infrastructure Bill is set to introduce a series of changes to planning regulations, which will significantly alter how development applications are assessed and approved. One of the major changes will see more planning decisions being made by appointed planning officers rather than elected local councillors, with committee structures being streamlined to promote what the government describes as efficient and effective debate. Critics, however, see this as a dangerous erosion of democratic oversight. Additionally, local councils will be given the authority to set their own planning fees to recover administrative costs, while legal actions aimed at blocking large-scale developments deemed meritless will face stricter scrutiny. The bill will also establish a new nature restoration fund, allowing developers to contribute to larger environmental projects instead of financing smaller localized initiatives, an approach the government believes will prevent unnecessary expenditures like the £100 million Bat tunnel required during the HS2 project. Another key aspect of the bill includes compensation schemes for communities affected by new electricity pylons, offering households up to £250 per year in energy bill reductions for a decade alongside funding for local leisure and community projects. While the financial burden for these benefits will be distributed across general energy bills, government officials anticipate that the added cost to consumers will be minimal, amounting to only a few extra pence per household. Despite broad support from developers and government officials, the bill's proposed modifications to environmental policies have sparked strong opposition from conservation groups. Critics argue that the reforms could weaken existing protections for natural habitats, undermining efforts to balance economic growth with environmental sustainability. As Labour pushes forward with its ambitious planning overhaul, it faces mounting resistance from farmers, landowners, and even its own senior officials. The infighting within the party suggests that Starmer's firm grip may be slipping as figures like Yvette Cooper grow increasingly vocal about the potential political and economic fallout. With protests intensifying and political opposition growing, the battle over land taxation and development is far from over. As the bill progresses through Parliament, it remains to be seen whether Labour can strike a balance between economic priorities and the concerns of those who stand to be most affected. Meanwhile, the government's latest crime and policing bill includes plans to recruit 13,000 additional neighbourhood police officers, according to the Home Secretary. Errors in counting police roles by the previous administration may have resulted in thousands of offices being overlooked, making the reduction in police numbers even more severe than originally estimated. Cooper informed MPs that the Conservative government had likely reduced neighbourhood police numbers by over 10,000, but she criticised the method used to track these numbers, saying it was inconsistent and unreliable. The proposed crime and policing bill outlines several measures aimed at reducing crime, such as addressing knife crime and tackling antisocial behaviour. These initiatives will be accompanied by the recruitment of additional officers and the tightening of online regulations surrounding the sale of dangerous weapons. As Labour continues to push forward with its legislative agenda, the party faces growing pressure both internally and externally. Whether it can weather the storm of opposition from rural communities, conservationists, and political rivals remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: the road ahead is anything but smooth.